Good evening. You're listening to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Tonight with me, I have Professor Pixel, the 20 young something millennial man. We're covering Twin Peaks Season 3, Episode 6 tonight. Pixel, I gotta say, this episode, it's not fun. It's not entertaining in a bad way. There's a lot of dark stuff in this episode. This is a very mean episode, and frankly, it's slightly disturbing. It's definitely got a lot of guts, gore. It's atypical for what we expect. We get the hint of the dark side of Twin Peaks sometimes in episodes, and definitely season 3 so far that we've covered has been fairly adult and all that, but not bordering on sinister. What was your initial take on this episode?
Well, my initial take of this episode is there's a lot to it, and I'm thinking that we're actually getting to address some things. The biggest frustration to talk about is Dougie Dale, kind of. But before we get to that, I think we should go ahead and get started. Where we left off last week, we saw Dougie Dale. He was standing in front of the statue, and now he's twisting the arm of his coat, just closing it up. For some reason, the guard that we saw him tell, "Hey, there's no loitering, you need to go ahead and go," from the end of the last episode, returns and starts asking his name, and he says Dougie Jones, and he's trying to get other questions asked, but Dougie's not great with answering them. Dougie then notices his badge, and he goes ahead and tries to grab at it, and it's kind of a relief to finally know that somebody's noticing, hey, something is seriously wrong with this man.
Yeah.
So after asking if he's been drinking or taking any drugs or anything, not getting an answer, they go ahead and cut, and he's saying, "Let me help you." And just going right into the next scene, we see Sonny Jim reading as Dougie's delivered home. His wife thanks the officers there and tries to pull him in. And that's when Dale, once again, he tries to grab that badge. And we obviously know Dale has a very important connection to badges. So I think he's trying to push through. But quickly, as soon as she gets him inside, she goes to make him a sandwich and says that tomorrow she's finally going to take him to a doctor. But that's when she notices the case files, tries to get some information about that. And with no answer from Dougie, she goes ahead and just says, "Go upstairs and tell Sonny Jim goodnight." So Dale goes head up there. And he sees Sonny Jim, and Jim goes ahead, gets up and pats the bed. And Dougie is eating chips from dinner, and he goes ahead and just sits down. He offers one to Jim, but the kid says, "I brushed my teeth." So for some reason, Dougie just goes ahead and puts the chip on the bed. And right as he's about to say, "Can I turn on my cowboy light?" and claps, Dougie learns clap on, clap off before his wife calls him down. Why? Because there's one special case file that she noticed, and she opens it up, and it's pictures of Dougie with Jade, and she wants answers, and Dougie's saying, Jade," because he doesn't know that he should keep that information to himself or try to make something up, and he just remembers her fondly as, "Hey, the woman who gave me 2 rides," and she's not happy to hear that. So she's really upset, but that's when a call comes, and she picks it up and tells him to be quiet. And that's when we hear the people that Dougie owes money, and they want $50,000. And she goes ahead and sets up a meeting and tells Dougie to get to work before he loses his job. Woo!
Yeah, it's a fairly long, extended thing. It's about a fourth or fifth of the episode time wise, and a couple of things to start off right off at the beginning, just to kind of trace back when he's standing there, or actually even before that. I failed to mention that in last episode, and I noticed it again in this one, so it's confirmed. We had talked about how early on you weren't necessarily fond of the new opening with Laura's theme playing, but it's starting to grow on you. And for some reason, I just didn't notice in like maybe episode 2 or 3 that Laura's face is in the clouds right before the music starts. I had sat down and
Really?
was, yes, I had my meal ready. I had went to go and I went, wait a minute. And I backed up and I was like, is that Laura? I'm like, yeah. So totally missed it. So I don't know if that's a new thing or what, but I definitely can say that it shows up there too, right when the music's getting ready to start. But some of the little things that I noticed too, because I don't really notice too much different than what you mentioned, is when Cooper's standing outside the statue and he's putting his hand up there, I'm going, is he thinking of the one-armed man? I don't know. So even though it's a security guy, not a cop, and he gets a ride home, when the cops or security people, cops, whoever actually dropped them off and couldn't really read their badges, go to leave, they're like, oh, miss, there's a package here on the ground. And it's that case file you mentioned that Janie noticed. One thing, too, that I've said, and I think is different right now in this episode, is up to now, some of the really intense acting episodes I thought were either overdone or not believable or just didn't work. But I'm going to give Naomi Watts a lot of credit here as Janie here, because she comes across as shrill, having to deal with Dougie. And we didn't really see her deal with the real Dougie, but good Dougie here. When she's sitting there at dinner, you can see her attitude change as they're like having a sandwich or whatever too, and you could tell that she does really love him and care for him. And yeah, she's upset that he was with Jade, and that was one of the best lines too. Jade give two rights. That was really funny, but it wasn't
Yeah.
like it was a laugh riot, because you can definitely see during this entire sequence when they're at the table that she's really trying to hold down the fort. And like I say, as one-dimensional as she's been portrayed so far, we're like, yeah. Now it's like, oh, okay, this is really, really good, and I'm liking it, because it is stressful for her for what she has to do, even though they've got a few $100,000. That's a lot of money, but I don't know if it's life-changing permanently and it's off the books. And I really like how in this episode, and we'll talk more about it as the episode goes on, how she decides to take charge. She's a strong female figure character, if you will, on how this is going to go without being bitchy or anything like that. I really was surprised by that in a pleasant way, and I really, really liked it. I didn't think there was anything remarkable about his interaction with the son, other than, it's a nice little moment. We'll see if that comes into play with anything too, because obviously we know this isn't the real Dougie. The thing that's interesting to me too is also when she's going through the case file and she sees the pictures of Jade. It's so clear when we see him that, and she's pissed, she's hot, that the Dougie's walking's got really bad hair. He's got a big pot belly looking kind of thing, and this one doesn't. They're the same person, but clearly the Dougie she's sitting across from, that we know is the good Dale, is lost
Yeah,
weight.
it's
Really just looks better, but she hasn't seemed to notice that yet, and we know it, so maybe we're looking ahead. But I thought, okay, that's got to be something which she realizes he's not the real one, if that's going to occur. So I thought it was interesting, because when she talks on the phone to the bad guys, it's no nonsense. I'm like, I really appreciate what she's doing in this role. I'm going, okay, this is not just another episode. She got some stuff going on with it. But yeah, moving on, we get a nice, familiar, long overdue transition scene at night where we see our traffic light that we've seen in a lot of the episodes we used to talk about. We see it here, but we get a more of a shift to a serious tone, because we see in the red room, we see the one-armed man there too, and it crosses back and forth between Dougie kind of just staring at some of the case files, and he's got a big stack of them. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He's operating at an infant level at most, but we see this kind of transition from the red room realm to the real world a little bit in front of the fireplace, where he's basically saying, hey, you can't die, you need to become alive. So it's a warning of some kind. We don't know what it is. It's very quick, but then you see Dougie, and it's not the rule of threes where it's always on the third one or something that you see a lot in movies and TV. You see him just kind of with his hand like a little kid scribbling, fisting the pencils that he's got. It's like he's divining through these different case files some traces of light, some sparkles that he sees, kind of similar to when he was in the casino winning all the jackpots, and it's Anthony Sinclair, which is the name of the guy that covered for him in the office scene, which we'll talk about, Mr. Marsden. And so he goes through several of them, and he's just drawing these things that might not really have any shape, although they look like stairs and they look like ladders or whatever. But ultimately, he just, through all of them, just basically kind of circles it or whatever. And we'll stop there before we get to the next scene. Did you notice anything about what was going on there?
The light as it was coming, I couldn't help but wonder what is helping him.
You saw definite sparkles, the
Yes.
very small ones floating down to it. So I'm going, it's whatever him as a vessel or as Good Dale has that we saw in the when he was winning the jackpot. So to me, I'm looking at it as the same thing. Something somehow is cluing him into Anthony Sinclair, and we don't know what that connection is going to be, but it's definitely there. I would call it a supernatural bit.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. All I can think of is this somebody from the lodge trying to assist him in some way. But moving on from there, we finally see something else. And it's not that I'm complaining about seeing Dougie Dale. It's just eventually it gets to a point where it weighs a little heavy. So we see Albert. He's talking on the phone to Gordon Cole, and he finally goes ahead and he just stops. He heads into this bar, and as he's walking in, what does he say? Like screw Gene Kelly, something like that.
F you, Gene Kelly. Oh, he's pissed. He's a little Singing in the Rain reference.
Yeah, because it's boring. So he walks into this bar, and we saw last week, or was it the week before? Doesn't matter. He said that he knows where somebody drinks, and that somebody who has a close connection to Dale. I was wondering if perhaps it was Annie Blackburn. But as Albert is going through, eventually he sees somebody, and he says, "Hello, Diane." And turning around, we see Laura Dern, and that's Diane. And it's, I mean, I never knew what Diane was supposed to look like, and I didn't know what to expect. Now I do. You want to say anything before I go into the next part?
Just that they're bringing out all stops to figure out what the hell is going on, and they're really concerned about it. And I like this. We're not. It's the less is more approach when it comes to his boss and Albert, and that they're bringing in Diane, who is not a happy camper. And this is the Diane that he talked to in this cassette there. So I thought this was neat that they fleshed this character out a little bit. Diane's rocking this Blade Runner type blondish, whitish, platinumish wig. It's pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting look.
Yeah. And from there, it's worth noting, I'm sorry, I did notice something, and I just finally noticed the note. When we were talking about the one-armed man moving around, when we saw that street light, did you notice the scratching sound behind?
I think I did. It didn't stand out, but I don't know if that's just a sound effect they're using whenever there's something like it. So I don't know that it really made me go, ooh, that's,
okay.
The same sound.
Well, moving along, we see logs, and then we see a car. And there we pan across a strange group, and they are with the punk from a few episodes ago, the one who was grabbing at a girl. And they're talking about drugs. And ultimately, it's the guy that we saw making eyes. I don't have any names here, which is kind of frustrating. But the guy in the leather jacket that was making eyes at Shelly and gave her like a point is working something out with the punk, it would seem. And the punk's like, oh, this is good shit. And this guy in the leather jacket is going on about so many things.
He is so high as fuck. He is out of his gourd. This is an incredible scene.
I don't disagree. But as he's moving, do you know about the King and I? I like it. Before he's finally saying, if the punk has everything under control. And I refuse to believe this man has anything going on with Shelley. I just have to go ahead and say that. The punk is called a kid, as he's asked, hey, you got this under control, kid? And the punk doesn't like that. And he doesn't like being watched either. But the guy in the jacket doesn't care and says that he can break his legs and do anything that he wants. He then takes out a coin. I believe it's a dime, and he flips it. And that's when the world seems to go into slow motion, and it stays up in the sky as they're moving before the punk reaches into his mouth and pulls out the dime. And then that's when the dime in reality lands in Jacket's hand. And Jacket says that Tails is the punk. And he's heads. Jacket, he wins. And from there, pretty much the punk kid, not happy, goes ahead and leaves and starts driving away. Do you want me to continue, or do you want to go? Do you want to take over for right now?
I got to throw a few things in here because this is such an incredible scene. I don't know if this is a supernatural thing. I don't know if it's because they're both high, because we'll call him aggressive punk because that's what we know him from the bar. He basically, it's like we said before, there's drugs gonna happen again here in Twin Peaks, it looks like, and he looks like he wants to run some down from Canada. I don't know if they're calling it sparkly or sparkles or something. And drug dealer guy, he's very handsy. Every time he does this like thing with both his hands coming out, they make like the sound effect, not quite like a karate chop, but it's just really weird because he runs them through his hair and does all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's just bizarre. And he's got a sweet Rolex on too. I just got to point that out. I don't know. I don't think it's an oyster. I think it's maybe a Submariner or something. I don't know, but it's beautiful. And yeah, I just don't get it. So I'm just going to assume that this is not a supernatural element. This is just, they're both high as can be, off sampling this stuff here, and this is going to develop into some sort of thing because we've seen aggressive punk with the lady, not a good look on his part, obviously, and there'll be more to talk about him shortly. But for the next scene, yeah, he's aggressive punk drives off in his really old, vintage-looking pickup truck, and he's just kind of having a self-conversation where he's just pissed off about being called kid. He's trying to be the man or whatever, and nothing really happens at this point, but we know he's leaving and going somewhere. But the scene after this, I actually kind of liked. They're at the Fat Trout Trailer Park. I have to try saying that fast 3 times. Fat Trout Trailer Park. I don't know where this is going. I don't know why we're back there, because when we first saw it several episodes ago, I think episode 1 or Fire Walk with Me, we just saw a couple things. It was a site of a murder, and I thought, okay, it's just one of those kinds of things, and that's it. But we see, I think his name's Carl. He's played by, I think he's passed now since then too, Harry Dean Stanton. I think he's probably about 85, 90 in this. He's driving a couple of the people from the park into town or whatever, because I guess he's like the owner or the what do you call it? The on-site manager or whatever you want to call it. He does stuff, and so there's something about Harry Dean Stanton, who seems very coherent despite how old he looks. And they even kind of have a conversation in the car as they go into town about how they go once a week and everything. I go, God, it seems like Harry Dean Stanton playing Carl here is really just speaking about himself and life. It was very, I don't think he's doing anything spectacular in this episode, but for some reason his delivery and everything just really got to me. I was like, holy crap, he's really nailing it, because he looks his age, he acts his age, but he's saying it with the wisdom of the ages and not as a bitter old man. And he's smoking, says he's been smoking for a long time. And this sets up a couple things that are going on, because we had that really, really long bit with Dougie, and now we're getting a few sublines here, and then we're going to get a cutaway to the diner. So I'll pause here and let you catch up.
Yeah, no, I am a little surprised to see him again. I never realized just how close to Twin Peaks this trailer park was supposed to be. And now I know. And quickly from there, we cut to the diner. It's a small scene. there's a woman named Miriam who's eating 2 pieces of pie, and she's a heavyset woman. And Heidi, who acted in the first episode of season 1 and the last episode of season 2.
Yeah, that's what we remember.
Reprised her role. And
they're giggling.
She has actual lines this time.
Yeah.
She's giggling along, and eventually the woman goes up to the bar and pays, and she says, "You can take the rest as a tip." And that's when Shelly and Heidi are discussing how she doesn't have the money to be leaving tips like this. What's she doing? It's very quick, and it kind of connects to this next scene as we see the trailer park man named Carl again, and he's sitting on a bench staring up at the tree, and he notices a mom and son playing this weird chasing game where the son goes up a little bit and she chases after him. They keep doing this, and he's drinking he's drinking his coffee as we see the punk speeding up, and he sees this line of people waiting, and he's like, "Screw this," goes ahead and turns. That's when we see the mother and son get to the sidewalk, and they have the right of way to pass across the street, at least according to the street light, and the people who are stopping going ahead is saying, "All right." And the kid runs across, and that's when the punk just rams right into him. Miriam from the Double R Diner sees this, and so does the trailer park guy, Carl, as he's walking down, and he sees the mother holding her son. And as the old man is staring, we see a yellow light from the boy float up into the sky. His soul, his spirit, whatever you want to call it. I think that's supposed to be what it's referencing. And that's when the old man moves to the mother. The two stare as the town is watching in horror. Then we finally see a pole, has the number 6 on it, and we hear that scratching noise that I mentioned before again from the phonograph. So it would seem, as we go up the pole and towards the sky, and that is where we cut. It's a very dark scene. I mean, often you don't show it. If you have a scene where something happens to a kid, you avoid it at all costs because that is pretty damn traumatic. And seeing it is just a level of disturbing that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I have a couple of issues with the scene. I have no problem that they went there. The way they did it, I guess technically bugs me because, yeah, okay, we see aggressive punk driving or whatever, so we know something bad's going to happen. And with Carl, played by Harry Dean Stanton, sitting there, he's taking in nature, looking up at the sky. You just get this feeling that, you know, his time on Earth is short. He's living every last possible moment he can. He's taking one of the most precious things we all can. That's just being at one with nature and at peace and present in the moment. And he sees the mom and the kid playing, and it's a nice touching scene because they're not talking, they're just doing a bonding thing, and it's just a really beautiful, touching scene. And you can see like a sadness almost pass over his eyes as he's watching, because he it's making him realize his own mortality. And it's just an awesome bit of acting here by Harry Dean Stanton. It's incredible. And the problem I have with it is not the actual accident itself. It's kind of the way they set it up, because you're absolutely right. They go there, they show it, and I'm going to go into some bit more graphic detail. When they get up to the intersection and they show the stop sign, we know, okay, the kid's going to get hit. This is a setup for it. It looks like it's going to happen. And then when they do the close-up of the stop sign, and the guy in the truck who's there first at the light, and he's waving him on, smiling at the kid, all happy seeing the mother and her son, it almost looks like she just lets go and says, okay, you just go ahead. It's almost like she shoos him across through a blind way. And I'm going, we can talk about good parenting, bad parenting, single moms, single dads, whatever we want to call it. It just looked like she literally just shoot him across. And I thought to myself, there's no way in hell I would know of any mother or any parent to let a kid do it. It's not like the kid was holding her hand and got spooked and ran, or decided to just be a one of those kids that just doesn't mind her mom and runs off. It looked very forced to me. And then when the actual collision happens, it was like, oh my God, they actually went there and did it. It's really, really poor CGI, because after you see that, what you see is the mother sitting there going to her child who just been hit and run over by the car. You even see the tire prints on the back of the kid, and the kid's a bloody mess. The problem with it is while she's grieving and Carl's sitting there too, and like you say, the teacher saw it as well. All the townspeople that kind of come out and they stand there shocked, it doesn't work. It looks to me really, really phony. It looks like they're going, okay, you got to act like you just saw a kid get run over and you have to look shocked, because it just doesn't work. So it doesn't deliver it. And I don't know if it's the strength of Harry Dean Stanton's performance in here that makes everyone look weak, but relative to all them, it really stood out to me as being a poorly executed scene for something that's so emotional and frankly shocking. I didn't think they would go to this level of darkness, if you want to call it that, in here. And I don't mind it. They upped the stakes for it. I didn't think they were cheesing out on us or something like that. It's extremely powerful and it does work. And I'm being nitpicky, but the look on a teacher's face, the calorically challenged individual, as you said, with the cups of coffee watching, making eyes with the guy driving off, that's really effective. We know this is going to be a thing. So I'm glad, like we talked about in, say, season 2, with some of the really side characters, it looks like we now know some ways these things are going to intertwine going forward. And we're going to presume, or at least I am moving forward, that they may have some tie into other people in the town and in the bigger picture of what's going on with Doppeldale's plan and Dougie coming to his senses, really the good Cooper. But let me ask you this. When we see the spirit of the kid fly up, it looks like to heaven, which seemed very symbolic. When we focus on the pole and the pole going up, did we not see that in either Fire Walk With Me or some scene? That seems very familiar to me.
Yeah, no, we definitely saw, and probably not that pole, but we had shots like that in Fire Walk With Me where we would go along the poles, and now it's accompanied by that sound, like we said, which has some meaning. We never noticed it before.
Right.
We weren't sure, but now it seems that has some connection with the Red Room, as it were, the spirit realm. And you're right. No, I agreed too. I was like, what are you doing? I don't care if you're playing a game. You don't tell your son, hey, go ahead and cross the street, even if you have the right of way.
That really, really bothered me. That upset me more than what I could argue is, a lack of 100% effectiveness of what they were trying to do. And
Yeah,
I like the
if
angle a lot. I do. Unfortunately, bad things happen like it. And here's a guy that's just completely bad news. We saw that in the diner. And if we just wanted to go, well, maybe he was coked out then and being rough with a woman, well, this should clearly tell you that this guy's horrible news.
Yeah, no. This guy needs to be shot. Go ahead and just stick him in the ground. Don't mark his grave. Nobody needs to know where this guy ended up. He's a real piece of garbage that just is a scum on society. And I'll let you go ahead and take the next note on top of that.
All right, so this next scene, we're flashing into Vegas, and we see, I don't remember this guy's name or if we knew it, because I feel like there's several characters' names we don't get. But this is the guy that paid gave his underling some money to say she's got the job. And based off what happens in this episode, I think we can say, okay, he's the guy that hired the woman who hired the people to put the hit out on Dougie, but it didn't work. And that's something we'll talk about. But he's working on his laptop, and this red square shows up on the screen, and it's just red. And I'm like, okay, is that supposed to be like the Red Room? Hell if I know. But he goes to this desk where he's got his safe in there, and he takes this envelope out of it, and it's got this black dot on it. It's not a very long scene. Nothing's really said in here. The guy he always has a concerned look on his face, so I can't really say too much about it. But the scene right after that I think is kind of neat, and it's also a very short scene as well, and then we'll pause before we get to the motel scene. You see the investigators where Dougie's car originally was at, where he was having his rendezvous with Jade, and you see the police going, "Yep, found it," because it exploded from what we remember, and the kid, had ran off. And I thought it was a nice little scene in here too, where there's a guy climbing on the roof across the street, and he's like, "Hey, I found the car plate," because it had blown off onto the roof of the house across the street, and he's reading it out to him, and of course it was Dougie LV or whatever, and you get it happens to be the house where the drug user girl and the kid seem to be at, because it cuts to the girl on the inside of the
119.
house who's really strung out. She's just yelling, yeah, like that was it 119 or whatever it is. It's real quick scene. I like it. It reminds us that, hey, this little angle is playing out here too. Otherwise, we might have forgotten about it. So quite a juxtaposition between some really long scenes to open up and now a couple short ones to really start setting up some other B and C level plot lines. I'll stop there before we get to the motel so you can fill us in.
Yeah, not a lot to talk about except this next scene in a motel, and we see a man writing down dice rolls. Maybe he's playing Yahtzee with himself. I don't know.
Vertically challenged individual.
A new vertically challenged individual, yes. And
let me start by saying, just because I have to say this, I think, here at the beginning, this is not like the older gentleman we saw dancing in a red room and speaking, backwards or whatever. This guy, if you just look at his face, he's attractive, he's mature looking, he's buff. Yes, he is maybe 4.5 foot tall, maybe. But he doesn't look like a vertically challenged individual that you would make fun of. This guy is all friggin' business. And you know what? He carries himself that way. This guy, for what's going to happen in this episode, I think was very effective.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. That's when he gets looks like a piece of paper with the black dot on it slid under the floor. He picks it up. It's actually a folder, and inside there are two pictures, one of a woman and another of Dougie. And he goes ahead and takes this ice pick that's in his room, picks it up, and he stabs the center of each of them. And that's where it cuts before we get Dougie Dale. Quickly, he's in an elevator, and I shouldn't say quickly because he's smiling. And Phil, that we met last time, a young guy, glasses, and has a bunch of coffees. He's saying, "Dougie, come on, Dougie." And eventually he does get Dougie off of there. And that's when we hear the boss calling for Jones. And Dougie doesn't notice the call until finally the boss calls him by his first name. And so he goes quickly over, and we see Tom Sizemore, whatever character he's playing.
I said Mazden earlier, but it's Sizemore, my fault.
Yeah, Tom Sizemore's just there watching until we cut to the office, and Dougie is pushed in there, and his boss is looking over the reports as Dougie Dale's just drinking his coffee. And he sees the scribbles, and the boss is like, "How the hell am I supposed to get anything out of this?" And he says, well, what is it? Might need help, something like that.
Yeah.
And that's when Dougie Dale notices that poster in the back that you pointed out last time of Battling, whatever his name is.
Bud Mullins. Bushnell Mullins. Battling Bud. Yep.
Battling Bud, that's right. Who's his boss. And he sees it behind him. And that's when the boss actually has kind of a confused look on his face as he's looking over these reports. And he's starting to get it. He's figuring things out. And eventually looks to Dougie Dale and says, "Thank you. I need you to please keep this information for yourself. And I'll take it from here. I might need your help again in the future." And he gets up and offers to shake his hand. And Dougie Dale, not understanding what's going on, stands up and turns around and makes the same motion as him. And that's when the boss says, "You are one strange, interesting individual, Dougie." And that's when we cut.
Yeah, it's a watchable scene. It's interesting. I think this boss actually seems competent as opposed to like a lot of managers that, we say, get promoted by, up to failure, the Pareto principle and all that sort of thing here too. I like this. He's convincing in his role. Now, of course, we're assuming it's insurance fraud. How this is going to play out, how it involves Dougie and Janie, I don't know. It's not a very long scene, but it seems to work. But this next scene I actually like too, because I mentioned earlier how it seemed like Naomi Watts playing Janie, Dougie's wife, she took charge and she's going to meet these supposed hitmen to pay off, was it $50,000 that Dougie owes? And if we didn't know that then, we know it now, because these two low rent dudes show up or whatever, and she's got her, she said, you would notice me because I'll have the red purse or whatever, and she's sitting by herself, and it's a kid's playground, which I like, it's public. And here she totally owns the scene. I got to give her credit for being an actress, the way they wrote this. These two guys basically say, hey, look, he borrowed the money, it's with interest, he doubled down, he screwed up, but we need the money. And they're scumballs, and they look like the kind of goons that would do something bad. But she takes it to a higher level and basically says, you let him do it, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to give you this. And she just is very convincing. And it's not, I think, an easy thing to do, because she's a petite, blonde, blue-eyed Australian woman, I believe, fit, but she's middle-aged. And she just totally owns these two guys, and it's a believable scene. It doesn't come across as bad like some of the other scenes where people are very emotionally charged. So again, I gotta give her credit. I don't know if maybe just my frame of mind based on what was going on, some of the scenes like with the kid or even early on might have colored things up, but I think this is an extremely effective scene. She gives him the wad of cash. They don't say anything other than, wow, she's tough. Yeah, really, really tough. But then from there, we get to another extremely, almost laughably graphic scene that I thought looked kind of silly, and maybe that's what shocks us. But there's another thing that shocks us. So we see this vertically challenged individual who's obviously a hitman. We see him running down a hallway, and it's a nice shot because it's just right around the corner, and one office door is open, and it's the lady we saw before that I'm a good guessing was the one that got paid by the dude we saw earlier with the dot to put the hit out, and she failed. So basically it's the second time this guy's hiring somebody to put the hit out on Dougie, and now with this lady, because apparently she failed, so she's got to go. This guy runs in, he's got jeans, like a gray sweatshirt on, he's got the ice pick, but if you notice when he's running around the corner and then runs right in the office, she doesn't know what's going on. His hand that's covering the ice pick or holding it is already bloody. And he walks in there and he runs her right into the corner, and it's one big nonstop shot. He starts gutting her right in the heart. And with the ice pick over and over, there's blood everywhere. This is gruesome. And he's got this feral look, like with bad teeth on his face, like he's drugged out of his mind. The dude looks like a badass, even though he's really short. He's run out. He's got blood all over his bald head. Some woman sees him and he chases the woman around the corner. We hear a bunch of stuff, but we don't see anything. It's an absolutely the most singularly brutal scene that we've seen ever in Twin Peaks that I can think of right now off the top of my head. Even more brutal and shocking than what we saw earlier with the kid. And then when he comes back around the corner, he notices his ice pick is all bent, and
he's very
end
sad.
scene. Yeah. Oh my God, what a shocking scene. And I mean that seriously. I laughed like, huh, and I went, oh my God, it was gruesome. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, no, I wasn't expecting it either. And when he ultimately he gets the woman, we know why they show this scene. But this woman has no connection to us. We've never seen her before.
We did.
We did?
We saw her briefly on the phone to some of the guys in the car that were scoping out Dougie when we first saw Dougie. Yes, there's two sets of guys. She was in charge of two of the guys, right?
Okay, then let me rephrase that. We have seen this woman before.
Yes.
But we don't know what the hell her deal is. So
she was contracted to get Dougie whacked, and I'd hired the two dudes.
But we don't have all that information. She's had exactly one scene in this show.
I'm just telling you, I remember her because I thought, what the hell's her name? She's one of those first characters we didn't know. And they played some sort of rap club crap every time she was on scene. And I think she was on the phone before too, something maybe in a quick scene, one of the earlier episodes. So we've seen her for maybe a minute's worth of screen time tops, maybe in like two scenes, except for now, or even including now, really.
But we know the point of this scene, and that is to show her dying. So that way we know what exactly this man is going to try to do to Dougie Dale. And the one-armed man earlier said, don't die. He's going to have to fight for that. So we cut from there to trees and trucks, and the punk stops, gets out, and tries to scrub the blood out of the front of his car. It's a very quick kind of scene. They take their time with it, though. And that's when we actually cut to something important. We see Hawk in the bathroom. And it looks like, at first, whenever he's washing his hands, it looks like he drops a dime. I didn't know exactly what it was. That's when he goes ahead to the stall that it landed under. And he picks it up. And it's actually a buffalo nickel. So he looks at it for a long moment, staring at the Indian head at the front. And then he turns around. And he notices a little plate that says Nez Pierce Manufacturing, and there's another Indian head right on that plate. And he sees that the door is covered and bolted and with this thin layer of like plywood, something like that. And he goes ahead and sees that he can start pulling it. So he moves, gets a crowbar, and he's starting to tear it off the door. And that's when Chad comes in. And Chad's like, does the sheriff know you're doing this? And I'll tell the sheriff if you don't. Such a dang Chad. Gosh. And he basically tells Chad to go away. And finally, he gets the plating down. And we see a letter. And that's what it looked like to me, that he is able to get out from under it. And that's when we do a quick cut to the Twin Peaks Sheriff Department Command Center, filled with deputies now. And that's where we see the wife come in and screaming that the car isn't working to the new Sheriff Truman. And so Sheriff Truman just says, let me take you to the office and we'll work it all out. And Chad says, as he's sitting there, that he wouldn't take that shit. And the woman that's working at the main console, it looks like, looks over and says that he wouldn't get it. And eventually reveals that their son apparently committed suicide. And Chad then says, oh, right, life's too hard from being a soldier. And we see the other deputies as he's staring off. Chad needs to go drop himself in a pit and never emerge again. That's what I feel. How does this guy even have a job? I wonder. And there's not much more to say because we cut to the roadhouse and there's a song and the credits come up, unfortunately, because we're back to the crappy end credit scenes.
I don't mind the end scenes. I know it's different. I think it kind of has to be just because of the focus of the show is not who killed Laura Palmer. I think these scenes were really good. What I really liked with Hawk was, again, give you something to do, but it was interesting because when he looks around, it's kind of like chance, divinity, whatever you want to call it. It's blind luck. And it made me think, wait a minute, is this the stall that the one-armed man was in before he got possessed by Bob early on and whatever? And did he put something in there? And I didn't go back and look or anything, but it made me go, I wonder if that's something that he put in there way back, I think in season 1. And we just never really got around to it. And I believe it was season 1. The next scene, though, while they transition the other part of the building with the angry wife coming in, we talked about how I felt like she overdid it and it's too much, and how he's being a super duper patriot dealing with her and all that. Obviously, they're alluding to the fact that there's something more going on here. So in a sense, we now are getting confirmation of it, because when a lady tells Chad, who's a complete jerk off, and we can't wait for him to get stabbed with an ice pick, hopefully, by everybody. He's just got that grubby look on his face where he looks greasy. He's just a slime ball. We'll see what happens, but we know Bobby's works for them as well, but we haven't seen him lately. We just saw him in that one episode real quick in the hallway, so wondering if they're related. But the lady is obviously disgusted with him. I don't know if they were trying to point him as being insensitive and make him out to be a certain stereotype or not, because his character is so one-dimensional. I agree with you. How the hell does he even have a job there with that kind of attitude with everybody? Because it's one thing to feel that way and believe it in your heart. That doesn't mean you're necessarily a bad person, but the intentionally trying to piss people off, and like when he was in there with Hawk, he's like, "Well, does the sheriff know you're doing that? I'm going to tell him." It's like, Hawk, just take that crowbar and just crack him over the skull. Don't look the other way. I mean, and nobody would feel sorry for this guy at all. So hopefully he gets what's coming to him, because we can't stand this guy. Yeah, and then the Roadhouse scene, there nothing happens. So just some other band that's playing, and we drift off and fade away at the end of the episode. Yeah, but overall, I gotta say, a very strong episode emotionally, and a very kind of serious one. And the stuff that seemed like it was cute and funny, like Jade Give Two Rides, really, I think, get forgotten, lost in the shock of the kid getting killed just like that. Harry Dean Stanton just sitting there looking up at the tops of the trees and taking a moment. Just beautiful scenes of stuff like that that I really missed in season 2 of Twin Peaks, that you could just have a moment. Um, Even if some of the scenes take a little long, like Dougie divining the name of Anthony Sinclair on all the case files, I don't mind it. It draws you into the moment. It's something that you end up remembering. Very strong episode for me. Not entertaining per se, not fun, but yeah, definitely a lot of, I think, hardcore plot points really get fleshed out here that maybe haven't been so far. I liked it a lot. I think it was very strong.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. Overall, this episode is definitely a more solid one. I like that we're getting somewhere. I feel like we still have ways to go, but this is episode 6 of 18, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And all I'm really waiting for is for Dale to return. I really want Dale Cooper as himself once again, and I understand we have to go through this to get there, but this is what it is.
Well, I'm starting to wonder now, because Dougie, while kind of cool, I'm starting to hit my Dougie dosage. I can only take a little bit of them, and that's it. I'm also now starting to wonder if this whole episode or season really is going to be, does Dale appear, and if so, when? And will it be at the very end? I don't know. But I could see that happening the way it's going. And frankly, the strength of the way they built everything up now, which started off slow in the first few episodes, it's working for me. It's bringing in these other characters that you can watch, and you're invested in them, and somehow they have some sort of loose interest to Twin Peaks. We don't know exactly how, but some of them are starting to unfold a little bit, and some of them are still kind of new. So I really been pleased with it so far too, and getting certain actors like Harry Dean Stanton in there, I think's been great. It's already talked about Naomi Watts, but even Laura Dern showing up as Diane, you're like, oh my God, that Diane. It's like, okay, that's
Yeah.
cool. It makes you think of the original show. So really good stuff there too. So want to take a moment and thank everybody for listening. I want to give a shout out to a couple of people. Take the Ring always really likes to comment or just let us know on Twitter when we're having a show go out, as well as was it Take the Ring and I Live in Twin Peaks or whatever. Visit Twin Peaks. This person actually moved to Twin Peaks because I think of the show, and post these few second snapshots from their phone or whatever about Twin Peaks with the time and the temperature. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. It's really interesting to see that the community out there really has a strong devotion for it, because no matter what we think of like Dale or what happens to Laura Palmer, there is something here that Lynch does capture with these people, with the emotion and all that. And we've had very little nitpick about too. And maybe the biggest thing for me might be, I'm not so sure if we've been told a lot of names or not, so we're going by the functionality. Oh, the lady that got hired to put this off, and
Yeah.
that's just how it is. But we'll see what happens there too. Yeah, I'm looking at Harry Dean Stanton's bio right now. He died in September 2017 at 91. So he was about 89, 90 when he filmed his scenes. Wow. Good for him.
Yeah.
He's been around a long time. We'll be talking about him more on the Xtreme Movie Show as we start and continue reviewing some of our Halloween type movies here, specifically The Fog a little bit later on. Even though he's not in it, he'll be in another one we're going to talk about at some point here. And that's, of course, is Escape from New York. I see still working for the man. On that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Professor Pixel for joining me, your host, Rob, here tonight on Xtreme TV. We just reviewed Season 3, Episode 6 of Twin Peaks. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Check us out on Facebook on the Xtreme Movie Show page. Join us there. Get the word spread around, too, so we can produce more content for you. Have a good night. As always, stay extreme.
Have a damn fine cup of coffee.
Good night, everybody.